overload. I've been running this rap game since I was 20 years old. I hung with the worst of them. Bust till I burst them up. Floss them up, toss them up. Harder way, close them up. Pardon me, I'm bossing up. Brace you up, bless you, bro. Don't mess with us. We like the U in the 80s. Back to back, set a track. Hit the lick, get it back. Get the trick, jump the track. Want my money back. Time and time again while I'm sipping on this gin. Al Davis said it best, just win, baby, win.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up.
Hey everyone, welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. There's a few more people who I know are trying to log on, and then we'll get going. Everybody, welcome. And welcome to Georgia Story Share. Can you? We're gonna ask you to stay on mute for most of the time, but let's just come off mute for a moment and just give ourselves a little cathartic hell yeah for what we've accomplished in Georgia.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for going back on mute. Appreciate that. My name's Andrew. This is Nina. We're the Gordon-Kirsch hosting this story share for you all. And I'm just really, really happy to see so many faces here and clearly so much interest and passion around this. And, you know, there was a request from many of you to share about our experiences, but we also want to bring in some context and some other stories of the great work that's been going on for decades before we got on the ground in Atlanta. Is there anything you want to say before we dive in?
I'm just really grateful to all of you because I know my journeys both to Arizona and Georgia wouldn't have been able to happen if it wasn't for people like you supporting me both financially and emotionally, sending words of encouragement and all of that. So I'm really appreciative of this huge village of family and friends who have lifted me up over the past 4 or 5 months.
Great. Well, so we're gonna take you on a little journey today, right? First we're gonna give some high-level context about how we even got involved in this and what brought us there. And then we'll give you a little bit of the day in the life of a door knocker. And then we'll go into some specific stories, some favorites of each of ours of experiences we had with folks on the ground. And then we'll wrap up with any questions that y'all feel moved to ask with whatever time remains.
And if you have questions while we're sharing, feel free to put them into the chat. We're going to monitor the chat as best we can. And if we don't get to answering them while we're sharing, we can answer them at the end if we have time.
Great. And I will also say we are recording. So if you don't want your image to be recorded, you can take your camera off. But we encourage you to leave your camera on because we love to see your faces.
And we're just sharing it with people who specifically said they wanted to be here, but they can't be here right now because it was last minute.
Right. All right. So let's start with that high level overview. So Nina and I, we went to Georgia with an organization called Seed the Vote. And Seed the Vote was initially created to get people on the ground in fact, like Talia, my beloved, who's on the call, signed up to go door knocking in Arizona more than a year ago, and that was the initial vision, was to help people in primarily blue states or areas that weren't going to be directly, let's say, energized by the election moment, right? Because of our electoral system, there's only a handful of states that actually get all the attention during the election cycle, the purple states. So Seed the Vote was a way for those of us in basically to get more people power on the ground in those purple state areas that needed additional support. And it wasn't going to be like us helicoptering in. The vision was always about partnering with local organizations on the ground to really build their long-term capabilities and to build their capacity for the long run. So the initial vision was to get all of us on the ground, and then COVID happened, right? And so then there was a big pause, and then there was a push, an ask for us to get involved in phone banking, and our family, thanks to Talia's leadership, happened to be Seed the Vote's first phone bank, and we started making calls to Arizona, and then there were something like 80 or 100 phone bank pods happening simultaneously. We made thousands and thousands of calls, and then we came. I forget exactly when in the fall it happened, but Seed the Vote was talking with our partners in Arizona, our partners in Florida, our partners in Pennsylvania, who we'd made phone banking for. And eventually they said, hey, you know what? We'd love more people to come on the ground to help us with door knocking, because the two most effective ways to get out the vote are door knocking and phone banking. We've been doing phone banking. We need more support door knocking. And so for the November elections, many people went out, including Nina. Nina went to Arizona, and she led a team of Sunrisers, folks involved in the Sunrise movement, and knocked on a hell of a lot of doors. You were there for what, like 50 weeks?
No.
It felt like that long. She was gone so long, but she was there for 2 weeks, and then we had big wins.
And actually, can I pause here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the parts about partnering with people who were in the states that we canvassed felt really important to me as someone coming from an outside state, that we weren't just going from an outside state and doing what we thought as Californians should happen in Arizona. Instead, we partnered with local Arizona organizations and knocked for them. We didn't do our own knocking. We got trained by them. We were on their they set up everything for us. So it felt like we were actually standing with the locals and helping them get done what they wanted to do. And one of the organizations who I ended up knocking with in Arizona and loved it so much that I knocked with them again in Georgia is Unite Here. And Unite Here is a union organization. And we knocked with Local 11, which was the union from Los Angeles and part of Arizona. And a lot of those union workers were folks who worked in the restaurant industry and hotel industries and lost their jobs in March because of COVID. A lot of restaurants closing down and hotels shutting down or needing less staff. And so these were people who lost their jobs because of COVID. And because they were in that union, the union ended up employing them to come and do canvassing. And so that was the organization that I ended up knocking with, and Andrew came and knocked with in Georgia too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's fast forward from November to January. For the Georgia runoffs, as I'm sure you're all aware, it was a really, really close race in November, and there wasn't a clear winner. So we had to go at it again for Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, two Senate seats that were up for grabs to flip the Senate blue. And so we did come through Seed the Vote, and we partnered with you, or we canvassed through Unite Here, that same union. It's a culinary union for hotel workers, restaurant workers, and so we met hundreds more people who are involved in the union, and so every morning we like meet up with this large group of people before we kind of sectioned off into our smaller group of 15, who was more like our family for the week and a half we were there.
And how it works, like logistically, how it works on the ground is specifically we'll take Unite Here. Unite Here is one of many groups organizing canvassers, right? So we're zooming into Unite Here, and just picture this also happening with a bunch of different organizations in Arizona and Georgia. And so how it worked for us is Unite Here would start with one office and run canvassing from that office out into neighborhoods that surround that office. And then when they got more canvassers, or when they felt that they had done a good job or didn't need to keep knocking that area, they would move their office to a different location and move to a different location. And what ended up happening in Arizona is we ended up having 5 different Unite Here offices. And our Sunrise team got bumped around to 3 of the different offices because we were so good that they wanted us to continue like moving to the new places and knocking new doors. And then in Georgia, Unite Here ended up opening 6 different offices. And by office, I mean outdoor parking lot. Like it's all COVID, right? Like everyone gets this huge empty parking lot in the morning, and that's the office. So it's like a centralized location where we pick up our gear and stuff like that.
Great. So I'll say one more thing about Seed the Vote, which is that I think Seed the Vote had something like 450 volunteers come in from various places to the actually not just Atlanta, but like greater Georgia, and so we were part of a very big coalition. It was quite amazing that Seed the Vote was invited into this coalition, because there was a group of local Georgian organizations that that we're talking about, that included Unite Here's local, that included Mi Gente and New Georgia Project and other great organizations that are doing stuff on the ground. And
when we left Arizona, Seed the Vote was like, oh, we're going to go to Georgia. Just kidding. We're not. We're going to wait and see what Georgians actually need, and we're not going to go. And there was like a whole process of at least 3 or 4 weeks after the election where we knew the runoff was going to happen, and Seed the Vote was like, we actually don't know if we're going to go or not. We don't know if that would be effective. We're outsiders. We're going to wait and see what our partner orgs want to do. Mm-hmm. And then Unite Here did, and New Georgia Project and Mi Gente, they all reached out to Seed the Vote, and they were like, we do want you to come. We really need more in-person canvassing because it's extremely effective, much more effective in that area than the phone banking, even though phone banking is still really important. And so the ask of Seed the Vote was, can you bring more people, but can you also hold them? Like Unite Here didn't have extra capacity to train us, right? So it was on Seed the Vote to not only make the connections we needed in order to travel to the Atlanta area, but also to train us and how to door knock and what the script was, and then also cut the turf and figure out where we're going to go every day, and then launch us in the morning, debrief in the evening. So there's a lot of additional organizational hoops for Seed the Vote to jump through to make sure that we all had a great experience, which we did. So that's the overview of Seed the Vote, and I don't want to bury the lead. So at the after we share some stories, Nina and I are going to ask you to give and to donate to Seed the Vote, because the organization spent a lot of money that they didn't actually have to get people to Georgia, knowing that this was going to happen, that whatever fees were not covered in the beginning
could be covered later. But also, it's worth noting that in the lead up to November, in the general election, See the Vote had an incredible surplus of donations, and See the Vote gave it all away to its partner organizations once November, once the November election happened, and that was all part of the plan. That was part of See the Vote's promise. Any additional income that See the Vote received in donations, they would pass along to their partner organizations, and that was part of the reason why Unite Here and Mi Gente New Georgia Project invited See the Vote into Georgia, was that See the Vote kind of kept its word, because they could have just said, well, now we're looking at the runoffs in Georgia, so maybe we should hold on to some of that funding. And they said, no, we're gonna believe in a world of abundance, and believe that we'll make it happen down the line. So have we put the donation link in the chat? Great, you can donate there. Nina is using a sunrise method of just putting the link in many times so that you don't lose it. You can get it there. And we just want to say we are incredibly grateful for all of the folks who've generously given to us and to this, I would call it, mini campaign to get us to Arizona and back safely. So with that said, we'll start going into a little more story sharing, and then we'll make another ask later on. What is that? Oh, okay. Folks are asking, oh yeah, there is a question about the Everyday People Pack. So if you donated online, you might have seen a note saying, oh, thank you for your contribution to Everyday People Pack. And if you were like me, you might have thought, I thought I gave to See the Vote. Who the hell is Everyday People Pack? And so I'm sorry for the confusion, but See the Vote is one effort within Everyday People Pack's kind of umbrella of organizing efforts, if that makes sense. So See the Vote is a part or department or initiative of Everyday People Pack. So
this is amazing. I'm just reading the chat. Y'all are amazing. I love it. Thank you for your support.
Wow, this is great. Yeah. Oh, this is so good. Thank you so much, Joe and Margaret and Talia, for making John and Margaret and Karen. Yeah, for making your pledges. Loving it. We're gonna keep it. Hopefully, it will keep rolling in, and we'll raise that money that See the Vote is looking to raise to come back in black. What's See the Vote? Oh, and then what's See the Vote's relationship with Unite Here Union? With that, I think Nina spoke to that a little bit, but there's a partnership, right? See the Vote was kind of a vehicle to organize lots of people to help out with local organizations, and Unite Here was one of those local organizations. Unite Here is a national union, and so there are local chapters of Unite Here in Arizona, in Georgia, in Nevada, where Talia and I door knocked as well. So that's the connection there.
And then how is coordination with other groups? So we didn't replicate doors. We did replicate doors. There's no coordination between different organizations. It's actually illegal for them to share info of where they're knocking and where another organization is knocking. So in Georgia, I would knock someone's door and they'd be like, you already came today. And I would be like, oh, it actually wasn't someone from my organization. I'm so glad they've already talked to you about these issues. When are you going to vote? And we were told that when that happens, then it's the second door knocker who comes, or the third or the fourth or the seventh, is called the closer. And you got to get that. You got to get that vote because you're the closer. They've already been warmed up. They've already been talked to about the issues. And something that Unite Here does that none of the other groups do, which is what we'll talk about in our story sharing, is we make more of a personal connection with the person behind the door, with the voter, and we start texting with them on a one-on-one level. So we'll talk about that more later, but that's something that felt really special about our organization as opposed to the other knockers, is we would text with our voters and not just leave them at the door.
Great. I think for the sake of time, let's start some story sharing, starting with a day in the life of a canvasser. You want to?
Okay, day in the life of a canvasser. So we were volunteer canvassing, and our day in the life is roughly the same as a paid canvasser who worked with Unite here, but in Arizona, because there were so many canvassers launching out of the same locations, all the paid canvassers would start earlier in the day and work a really long day, and the volunteers would come a little bit later. So in Arizona, we started either at 11 or at 12. That was our shifts were either from 11 to 7 or 12 to 8. And that's how it was in Georgia. We worked 11 to 7 most days. So we arrive at the parking lot, the glorious parking lot at 11, and we do a huge circle up with all of the Unite Here and the Seed the Vote volunteers and canvassers. And our office in Georgia was 4 or 5 Unite Here teams and 3 Seed the Vote teams, one of which was Sunrise. So there was probably like 80, 90 people in a really huge circle every morning. And we would do COVID checks, get our temperature checked, fill out tracing forms, and have a mask on, an N95 mask on or a cloth mask on, and a face shield, and everyone's standing 6 feet apart. So it's a really, really big circle. And then the head of the Unite Here office would do a big cheer, a union cheer, si se puede, and give us some stats of how the election was going, or how many doors our office knocked the day before, or how many votes we got. Oh, Andrew's demoing the gear that we wore every single day, all day. And another part about Unite Here is they had really, really strict COVID protocols. So that's another reason why I went back to Unite Here for Georgia, because in Arizona, they were really strict with all their COVID protocols. So we have our opening circle with a big group, and then we split into our small 10-person, 15-person teams and do a smaller circle up. And this is when we do practicing for the day. We pair off and we practice knocking with someone else in our group, and we do scenarios, things that we might run into, like if somebody has a mail-in ballot versus if somebody's going to go vote early in person, or all the different scenarios. We practice them in the morning. Because it's really hard. It's really hard to knock somebody's door. So all the practice we can get in the morning with ourselves and each other is fun, is easier than with the stranger who's actually the voter. And then we get assigned turf. That's the word, turf. That's like the lingo. Your turf is the neighborhood that you're going to go knock for the day. And you get assigned roughly 80 doors to knock between 11 and 7. And you get a pair, and you and your partner, we were in the same germ pod, like biopod, so we could drive in the same car. And so we would go to the same neighborhood and split up. We wouldn't knock together because of efficiency. We want to knock as many doors as we can. So we would go first to my turf of 80 doors and knock all of them, and then meet back up at the car, and then switch and go to his turf, knock all of them, then meet back up at the car. And so that was the goal, is that each of us would get about 80 doors. Sometimes we got 60, depends on how conversations went, how many not homes there were, that kind of thing. And we'll talk more about who was behind the doors next, but that's just logistically, that's how it worked. And then at the end of the day, in Arizona, we would all go back to the parking lot, turn in all of our gear from the day, and fill out our numbers. How many doors we knocked, how many conversations we had, how many votes we got, and like debrief anything that we needed to debrief. In Georgia, because we were more spread out, and mostly because of just COVID safety, we didn't all meet back up again. We went home and we did our debrief over Zoom each night. So I would run the debrief for our Sunrise group every night at 8 p.m. And we talk about highlights, we talk about challenges, and any other, and fill out our forms of how many numbers, how many doors we knocked. Because Seed the Vote and Unite Here likes to keep track of how many doors were knocked and how many votes we got.
Yeah, and when Talia says, like, when Nina says how many votes we got, that's like how many people have texted us back saying I voted, and how many how many people texted us a selfie or a picture of them with their I voted sticker, those peach stickers that you saw on the slideshow as we were starting. So that's one of the differentiators between Seed the Votes canvassing efforts and others, is that we, as Nina was saying, we, in the conversations that we had with folks, one of our final asks was, oh great, can I send you this information by text, and will you send me a picture of your I voted sticker when you go to the polls? And that it's a level of accountability that we incorporate into our conversations that that Talia and I didn't do, for example, when we went to Nevada. And I found it to be quite, it makes a big difference, right? Because not only does it mean that that voter is talking with someone, and then, like, you know, they can text me if they have questions later on, but also I get that positive feedback when I see those peach stickers coming in. And also I got very peach hungry as the days went on, because, you know, it wasn't a competition. They weren't trying to like pit us against each other or say like, you know, who got the most votes. But I will say that Seed the Votes numbers, the vote count numbers, were on average higher than some of the other, even the paid canvassers. And I think part of it has to do with that tactic of the peach sticker texting.
And in terms of how, like, what doors we knock and what we don't knock, everything worked off of an app on our phone, and the data that's in the app is very specific data. So we wouldn't just knock every door. We would only knock people who have, it really changes, the strategies change. In Georgia, we only knocked people who were already identified as Democratic and already likely going to vote for Ossoff and Warnock. We weren't talking to any Republicans unless it was a mistake in the data, which did happen. We did talk to people who were undecided or people who didn't vote very much, but likely were in a household of Ossoff and Warnock supporters. So that's how it worked in Georgia. We were, and this was something we said a lot while we were there, is we weren't in Georgia to convince anybody of anything. We were really only in Georgia to lift voter suppression and get people out to the polls who are already blue, because Georgia's already a blue state and there's just so much suppression that those folks don't actually get to arrive to the polls or don't get their vote to be counted because it gets the signatures wrong or whatever. We can talk more about that later. But that's the strategy in Georgia. In Arizona, the people on our list definitely were like undecided or independent, and we did have those conversations with them for Biden and Kelly. But depending on the strategy, the list in the app that you use for canvassing is different. Okay, stories.
Yeah, let's get into stories. So
one logistical question.
Okay.
We did offer free rides to people, or not free. That's part of Seed the Votes money, is that they paid for a ton of Lyft rides, so many Lyft rides for people to get to the polls. And that's part of what this money goes to. So if you donate, that will help reimburse Seed the Vote for all of the rides, literally hundreds of rides given to people to get to early voting sites and on election day.
That's a great segue, actually, because you know, even just thinking about the logistics of getting to the polls is not as straightforward as I once thought, you know, before doing this work. Like, for example, I talked to a guy named Theo, and this was election day morning, January 5th, and he said he was about to go to the polls with his sister, but their car broke down. And so now they were waiting for their friend to come pick them up so that they could go vote. And so, of course, then I talked with him about, texting stickers. He gave me his sister Sephora's number. And so eventually I heard back from Sephora that they did go to vote and they made it. But, you know, had their friend not been able to pick them up, it would have been a question of how they make it to the polls. And so that's where these Lyft rides was really a big opportunity for us, and way to ensure that folks could get there. But other logistics were like, you know, people weren't always clear about where they were supposed to go on election day versus early voting. On early voting, you can go to any number of polling locations in your county. On election day, you have a pre-assigned spot that you have to go to. And if you show up to any of the other ones, you're going to be turned away. And so
That was in Georgia.
yeah, right. So in this situation, folks who were either planning to go early, but for whatever reason didn't make it, when thinking about going on election day, sometimes when I talked to them about where they were headed, we realized that they actually didn't have the correct location in mind. So it was really helpful to get that information and the address, so that they knew precisely where they were going and at what time. Shout out to Drew and Megan, our local Georgians over in Savannah. Drew just said, like, I can tell you that our election polling location changed the morning of the runoff, and the sign informing voters was barely readable from the road. So it's a great example of how voter suppression was at play. Like, the Republican Party has had a hold on state politics for a long time, and the now governor has been kind of changing the rules really to attempt sustained Republican rule, and part of that is a big part of that is through voter suppression. There's a number of tactics that are being employed, not just in Georgia, but throughout the US, that you can find out a lot more about in Stacey Abrams' documentary, Fair Fight. I'm gonna put that in the chat now. You can watch this documentary on your own time. It's on Amazon, and it's really, really powerful to see some of the different ways that folks have been kind of disenfranchised. And there's a really, really clear line that can be traced, or a thread that can be woven from slavery to Jim Crow to today's disenfranchisement and voter suppression, specifically in Black communities in Georgia, in this case, but throughout the country as well. It really helped me connect the dots as well. All right, so you want to share a voter story?
Sure. I guess actually I kind of wanted to just read one of my text conversations with somebody from Arizona. I knocked on his door. His name's James, and I actually didn't knock on his door. It was Halloween, and the sun was going down, and he was sitting on his porch ready to hand out candy for Halloween. And so I talked to him about voting. He's like, oh yeah, I'll go. I'm going to go. And I was like, great. When are you going to go? Here's your location. What time are you going to go? Are you going to go tomorrow? Get all the information. That's what's called like getting a voting plan from somebody, is you help them plan every step of the way. Like, you don't just say like, oh, you're going to go? Great. It's like, when are you going to go? Okay, tomorrow. Tomorrow's Monday. Do you have work? What time can you take off from work? Do you have meetings? Let's check your schedule right now. Oh, you can go at 2? Great. Let me just text you the location of where you're voting, and then text them whatever. So then this is James. And I often will say to the person who I talk to at the end, all of us are volunteering out here talking to people, and we really celebrate when someone actually goes to vote. So would you mind sending me a selfie of you voting, or a picture of your I voted sticker? And that way all of us volunteers can like get hyped and be like, yay, people are actually voting. And he was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll definitely do that. And so I asked James the next day, like, if he was gonna go, and he said, thank you for volunteering and stopping by. I intend to vote Monday afternoon sometime, and will make sure to send you a selfie immediately after voting. If there's anything else I can do that will help you get special prizes, let me know. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And then I said, great, thanks, James. Like, were you able to get some trick-or-treaters last night? He said, pretty lame. It was 2 or 3. That was it, because of COVID. And then the next day I texted him again. Good morning, James. What time are you headed to the poll today? No response. Later that night. Hey, James, how did it go today? Did you vote? No response. Next day. Hey, James, I left you a voicemail. It's election day today. Every vote matters, especially in Maricopa County. Later that day, James, you're killing me. Have you voted? He writes back, lol. I said, oh my gosh, does that mean you haven't voted yet? And then he wrote back, I voted. And I said, you did? Come on, James, don't lie to me. And he said, you didn't get my selfie photo yet? And I said, no, but I believe you. And then he sent me his selfie. And that's just the kind of thing where it's like, we really had conversations with people. It wasn't just like some people would text me back and just say, stop. Because they didn't want me to text them anymore, which is, fine, whatever. I'd write, I'm actually a real human. I talked to you yesterday. But some people were really nice. So that's my text story.
Yeah. I have a story. So I spoke with Gwen. Yeah, that's definitely worthy of applause. So that was in Arizona, and similar conversations in Georgia as well. Like I spoke with someone named Gwen. She was a mother. She had 2 daughters. One of the local state universities, and her twin daughters were at school, but they were coming back into town later in the week for New Year's. And New Year's Eve was the last day you could vote early. And so Gwen said that her daughters were coming in on New Year's Eve in the morning, and that they'd all go to the polls together, her husband and her twin daughters. And so then I followed up with Gwen the night before. Hey, just checking in. Is your plan still to go with your family tomorrow? Your daughter's coming to town. She said, yep, we're planning to go. And then Gwen sent me the next day, New Year's Eve day, happened to be raining in Atlanta, and it was a rough day. We were going, it was slow. We moving between doors was slow. These damn face shields were totally fogging up, and it was hard. I think we did not get the sympathy responses that we anticipated when people saw us, knocking on their door in the rain. And by and large, it was just kind of a demoralizing day. But
there's no windshield wipers on face masks.
There should be face masks with windshield wipers, but alas, we're not there yet. Gwen did text me and she said, yes, we made it. Here's the selfie of me and my husband. And then she said, the twins are coming later. And then I got selfies of the twins. So then I said, oh, here's a selfie of me door knocking in the rain. And I sent her a selfie because hey, selfie for selfie, why not? And then she said, oh my gosh, you're doing this in the rain. I'm going to go call 5 of my friends and tell them to go vote today because you're working so hard. Right. So it's that sort of thing where, we're really trying to build this reciprocal relationship and then, do what we call vote tripling or in this case, quintupling to, to get folks to become those canvassers to text or call their friends and make sure they made it to the polls. Do you want to share another story?
Yeah, sure. I'll share another story this one's from Georgia. And it was the day before election day, Monday. And I had a household of, it shows you how many people in the house you're looking to talk to in the app. And there was 4 people, one of whom had already voted. And so I was looking for 3 people. And one of those 3 people was a young man named Jamil. He was 22. And so I got to the house and I actually didn't knock on the door because I saw there were 2 people in the driveway. So I just approached them and I was like, hi, my name is Nina. I'm here with Georgia Voters talking to folks about the election tomorrow. Is one of you Jamil? I'm talking to folks about voting. And the older brother, Jafar, was on my list, has already voted. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm Jafar. I've already voted, but that's Jamil. Go get him. And I was like, yes, Jafar's on my team. And so I was like talking to this 22-year-old and I was like, Jamil, have you voted? Have you thought about voting? And he was like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't read about the candidates yet. And I really don't want to vote if I'm uninformed. I really want to be informed. And I was like, yeah, totally. I'd love to answer any questions you have. And just was like, great, let's get you informed. And we talked about Ossoff and Warnock for probably about 10 minutes about healthcare and about minimum wage and unemployment and just generally COVID. And I was like, how are you feeling now? Do you feel a little more informed? And he was like, yeah, I feel a little more informed, but I definitely want to do some research on my own. And I was like, okay, let's make a voting plan for you for tomorrow. And we went through, he got off work at 4:30. He had a 45-minute drive. He'd get to the polls before it closed. all of that. We made the plan, and his brother was like in the background, kind of like doing other stuff. And I was like, Jafar, Jamil said he's gonna vote tomorrow at 5 p.m. Can you help make that happen? And he was like, I don't know, I'll try, but I don't know. And that night I texted Jamil his voting plan. I was like, you're voting. Thanks for talking to me. We talked about this. You're going to vote at this location at this time. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure to bring your ID. I texted him again the next morning, reminding him. And then I called him when he was getting off of work, and he answered. And I was like, "Hey, Jamil, it's Nina. I talked to you yesterday." And he was like, "Oh, hey." And I was like, "What's up? Are you at the polls?" And he was like, "I just got off work. I'm driving home now." And I was like, "Oh, why don't you just drive right to the polls?" And he was like, I have to go home. I have to get something." And I was like, "Okay. Well, what time are you gonna go to the polls?" And he was like, "I don't know. I'll see how it goes. I'm gonna get home first." And I was like, I hear some apprehension. I'm just like curious what's coming up for you. I'd love to talk to you about it. And we talked. He was commuting, so it was like a great time to talk to him. And we talked for like half an hour again about the candidates, and just like he was like, "I don't know, like my wallet got stolen. I'm not sure what form of ID I'd have to bring." And so I looked it up right there, and I was like, "You can bring your do you have a passport?" And he was like, "Yes, I do." And I was like, "Great, you can get your passport." Um, and he was like, "I don't really want to wait in line for a long time." And I was like, "That's honestly something I can't help you with. Like, there might be lines." And he was like, "I know, I'm trying to see if one of my friends will go with me." And I was like, "Yeah, that would make it more fun." I was like, "Jamil, what if I go with you? I could meet you in line and we could just wait in line together." And he was like, "No, no, 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 please don't." And I was like, okay, that's fine. But you can call me if you're bored in line, or text me, whatever." And he was like, "Okay, I'll think about it." And then I called him back again an hour later, when my shift was finishing. Election day was almost over. And I was like, "Jamil, like, haven't gotten your selfie yet. I'm curious if you've gone to the polls." And he was like, "Nina, I just left the polls and I voted." And I was like, "Yeah, Jamil." It was his first time voting. That was exciting.
I love that. We've got a couple questions coming in, a specific request for one of your stories from Arizona, Nina. So I'll just show that to you while I share this next one. My first night canvassing, we just did like an hour and a half kind of test drive of the script. And I spoke with Emily, and I will say one of the great resources that Seed the Vote offered was a WhatsApp thread where we could ask any question we wanted. And then there were volunteers dispersed throughout the country who were on call to research whatever questions we had. So that we basically had a like crack team of researchers to answer any questions about the elections and what to do should any voters at the door have questions that we couldn't answer ourselves. So it was my first night, and I talked, first this guy answered the door. And I said, "Oh, hi, I'm here to talk about the elections. Can I please speak with Emily?" She was the person on my list. And he looked at me, he took this long pause. He looked at me, he said, "Well, I can ask her to see if she wants to talk to you." And then he like walked off and just left me at the door for a while. And I was like, "Okay, I wonder what's gonna happen." And then Emily shows up. She's 23. She's super excited to talk to me. She's like, "Yeah, no one else in my house is really excited about politics, but I'm really into this election and I want to make sure I vote. But here's the thing, I was gonna go vote early, but then we were celebrating Christmas with my family, and my brother just tested positive for COVID, and so now I can't go to the polls. What do I do?" And so I was like, "Oh, okay. So I'm not sure. I'm gonna find some information for you with my crack team of researchers." So I texted, and I was like, "Okay, this person is quarantining." So the first thing they told me was run away, get her phone number and run away. And that is like, like part of it is just like, take care of yourself first. So be safe, right? So I got her phone number, and then they gave me information about, how can Emily request a ballot, and then where can she drop it off? Because, she doesn't want to go, she doesn't want to mail it in because we're not sure if the postal service will get it in on time. So then, Emily and I just stayed in touch by text for the next week after we met. As I would check in with her. "Hey, Emily, did the envelope come? Did you get your ballot?" And then sure enough, she sent me a picture of the ballot. I'm like, great, could you send me a picture when you put it in the ballot box? She says, yeah, sure. And then eventually, then she actually texted me back. She's like, oh, do I need postage if I put it in the ballot box? And by this time, I'd had many conversation about ballots. And I told her, no, if you mail it in, you need postage, but if you drop it off, you do not. So that's a great option for you, especially in quarantine. And so sure enough, she got to vote. She sent me a little picture of dropping the ballot off in the drop box and another peach in the bank. Yeah, you want to kick it over to you, and then maybe this will be the last story, and then we'll make the ask again to donate, and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah, and I guess what before I share about Patrick from Arizona, I'll say what happened right before I knocked on Patrick's door. We're telling like the fun example stories of getting votes, and it's a small percentage of our doors that we're telling happy stories about, right? Like most of our doors are either people who are not home, or I can literally see them inside of their house and they are not coming to the door. Like, or they answer and they tell us to go away. So right before I knocked on Patrick's door, this was in Arizona, I was at an apartment complex and knocked on a door that the screen gate was closed, but the door was actually open. So like I could hear what was happening inside of the house. And I knocked on the door and a woman came to the door and was just like, what are you here for? And she was angry. And I was like, oh, I'm talking to people about voting. I'm looking for Catherine. Is Catherine home? And she was just like, get the out of my door. If you ask one more time, I'm going to set my dogs out on you. And slammed her door so hard. And like, I'm only sharing that to say that this work is really hard. And that's what happens. Like that's a lot of the energy that we receive when we're knocking, is people don't want to talk to us. Why would somebody want to talk to someone knocking at their door when they want to be at home by themselves? So that happened. Then I went to my car to take a breather and have some water and take my mask off and remember why I'm doing this work. Took my break, put my safety stuff back on, and then knocked at my next door. And a man named Patrick opened his door, and he's blind, and he had a dog there with him. And we got to talking. I told him like verbally who I am and what I'm here to do. And the first line that he said to me was just like, wow, thank you so much. I've been waiting for you. And that's not something I really ever heard while canvassing. Nobody's ever waiting for the canvasser. And I was just like, oh my God, like I'm doing something good. Like this person actually wants me to be here. And he was like, yeah, I don't have any family who I live with. My only family member who lives nearby is my brother, and he's Republican, and I don't trust him to fill out my absentee ballot. And so I'm really happy you're here. Thank you so much. I actually can't find my absentee ballot because I can't go through my own mail. And I'm wondering if you can help me find it. I've even called the registrar's office and asked them to send multiple just in case one didn't come, to make sure I had one. So Patrick and the dog and I walked to the mailboxes for the apartment complex, found his mailbox. He had so much mail. We went through all of it, found both of his ballots, just used one of them, discounted the other. And legally how it works is I had to read every single word on the ballot to him in order for me to legally be able to fill it out with his consent. So I was with Patrick for about 2.5 hours standing out because of COVID, standing outside of his door, reading everything to him, filling it out, doing, and then at the end he was like, he really was just like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And you helped me get my mail. Like, this was such a good day for me. It's such a win. And at that point, I didn't know if I was allowed to take the ballot or not, because legally I didn't know. So I texted the WhatsApp thread trying to find out the answer, and nobody responded. But I was like, okay, Patrick, I'll come back in about half an hour if I can take it. But for right now, you keep it and we'll order you a lift to be able to bring it to a drop box. And then I found out that I could get his ballot and bring it to a drop box. I just had to sign the back of the ballot. And so I went back, I said hi to him again, got his ballot and brought it to the drop box for him. But just felt really grateful that he was grateful to receive me after having the door slammed in my face before him. So yay.
Yeah. So that's just a handful of really powerful stories that we experienced. And then there were, so many more stories that we heard in our daily debriefs from our team and from other folks on the ground. And I'll lift up something that Nina said too, but one of the stories that was really powerful for me was what another canvasser said. She was saying, I'm realizing that we're not flipping Georgia blue. Georgia is already blue, and we're not having persuasion conversations. We're helping combat voter suppression and helping people make their voice heard. And so, in that light, Georgia is already blue, right? Like, and we just need to make sure that those voices are represented, as opposed to what historically has been the case, where for many, many reasons, those voices are not, in the room. And so with that said, I do want to make an ask for you to donate to See the Vote. And we have this donation page that we're putting in the chat again. Take a moment to, picture a number in your mind. Just take a moment to picture a number, an amount in your mind that you think about giving. So I'll give you all a second to do that now. And then I'd like you to consider doubling that number and just seeing what that feels like. Just play around with that number, that new doubled number in your mind. What would it feel like to give that amount to See the Vote, to help people, make it out and to help our Senate flip blue, so that we can have a blue Senate and House and executive branch, so that maybe we can have, folks have a higher minimum wage, or better access to healthcare, or COVID stimulus checks that are more than $600.
And I'll say on a personal level, I quit my job in September on Apocalypse Day in the Bay Area to do work to volunteer for the elections. And so I have no income, which means that I was relying on donations fully to get me to Arizona and to get me to Georgia. And that I only could go because other people supported me to go. And so that was a huge deal. And I know for Georgia, the cost of me going ended up being, just on my own personal costs, was $1,650. And that doesn't include what Unite Here provided for me, like face masks, umbrellas, hand warmers, snacks every day, a bunch of stuff like that. So, and I'm one of 15 Sunrisers, one of 450 See the Voters, and one of over 1,000 Unite Here folks. And Unite Here is only one of the many organizations who canvassed.
Yeah. It should be said, Unite Here, Mi Gente, New Georgia Project, they all pitched in money towards the effort because See the Vote has been partnering with them. And now, See the Vote is asking us, all the volunteers, to help make up that last bit. I think last time I checked, we were, I think, 20 grand short. So it's totally doable, and we'll get there. And just really, we really appreciate all of your support that's coming already, and just want to make the ask. And also, for those of you watching the recording later who couldn't make it live, thank you for being here, and thank you for considering giving to See the Vote today.
Look at all these donations. Thank you all
this is
so
great.
much. It's so good.
So I want to put on, I want to give you all 2 minutes right now to make these donations. So we'll put these in the chat. I'm gonna play a song for 2 minutes, in case anybody is trying to do this right now.
No,
and
do
then,
it right now.
Yeah, do it right now.
And then we'll come back and
we'll come
answer
back.
questions.
The whole day through, just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. I said, Georgia, Georgia, a song of you comes as sweet and clear as moonlight through the pine. Other arms reach out to me, other eyes smile tenderly, still in peaceful dreams I see the road leads back to you, my sweet Georgia, Georgia. No peace I find, just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Other arms reach out to me, other eyes smile tenderly, still in peaceful dreams I see the road leads back to you. I said, Georgia, my sweet Georgia, no peace I find, no peace just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind, Georgia, on my mind, just an old.
Okay, so thank you all so much. This is amazing. Thank you for all your support to make this happen for all of us and for Seed the Vote. Seed the Vote literally gave money that they didn't have because they believed in a blue Georgia and wanted to make that happen, and gave all that they could, knowing that the future would provide. And you are the future providing. So thank you. Andrew and I will stay on for a little bit after if folks want to ask specific questions, but thank you all so much. I really appreciate being seen and held by the community in this work. We are all doing it together. Yay.
Shout out to our family and friends, and then to also the folks who invited other people to be here. It's great to see new faces that we don't even know or haven't met yet. So welcome, and thank you all for your support.
And if you want to come off of mute and cheer and say bye, and then folks can settle for questions who want to stay a little longer.
Yay!
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, so proud of you guys.
Yeah.
Totally. This was wonderful, just wonderful.
Oh, thanks everybody.
Be honest, weren't you the best door knockers? I mean,
Of course they
No,
were.
actually, no, I will be real. So I was team lead for the Sunrise group, and in Georgia, the team leads all had a thread going to communicate between each other. And at our headquarters, on election day, we would give updates about how many votes our team had, just to like raise morale and know that votes were coming in, and to be able to add up the number of votes that we were actually making a difference with. And at lunchtime, I sent in that the Sunrise group had 51 votes and counting. And somebody replied, one of the Unite Here, one of the paid canvasser groups replied to mine and was like, oh, like the new kids on the block are raising the competition, because our group was higher than the paid canvassers who had already been there for a few weeks. And then by the end of the day, once I had our whole team enter their numbers, the Sunrise group of 15 people had 143 votes in one single day, which was like unheard of, really amazing. So they said that we were like the young people on crack being really friendly.
Who wouldn't want to say no to this face?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.